Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So I'm coming to you from a secret train watching spot. That's what my wife used to call when I would go to watch trains. A secret train watching spot near the terminal in Manuka. So I had this load that I dropped off in Auburn, Indiana last night, like right after midnight. Like my earliest delivery time was 00:02. I got there about 12:30, dropped it off, got an empty, went and did my 10, and then I got a pre-plan for a load out of Illinois that's designed to get me back to the DMV. If you don't know what the DMV is, that's the District, Maryland, Virginia, because they have a trainee assignment for me. So this load, though, is a 3-stop load, and it doesn't get back. So the last delivery, the 90, it delivers sometime Monday. I don't even know exactly when, because there's not an appointment for that. But you know, so I sent a message to my fleet manager after I saw the pre-plan, and the pre-plan, you know, indicated it's a pretty lucrative load. So I'm grateful for the load. But I sent my fleet manager a message and I said, hey, so I think after I deliver this, I'm gonna take a couple of days off, and then I'm gonna pick this trainee up on Friday, so a week from tomorrow. And the reason I did that is because if you've been not in a coma and you drive a truck for a living, especially over the road, then you know that the blitz is coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, so 16, 17, 18 of May. And so my thought was, okay, well, I could make this last delivery and then basically get this guy at some point on Monday or maybe early Tuesday. But do I really want a guy who has only like backed up in between some cones, who has driven around in a big box and not killed any pedestrians, and did a pre-trip from, you know, rote memorization, right? That's his experience with trucking. Do I really want him, his actual first day behind the wheel of a truck, you know, outside of a very controlled environment, to be the day that they do start the annual 3-day blitz? And oh, by the way, Maryland is fairly active when it comes to pulling in trucks at way stations and stuff. I have had at least a level 1 and a level 2 at Maryland way stations since I've been at Prime. So in the past 2 years, because really, like, I'm right at my 2-year anniversary. And I think, yeah, that's so in the last 2 years I've had 2 inspections in Maryland, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I've only ever had 5 in 4 years. So I don't know if I'm lucky or if it's just because they're like, oh, let's pull this guy in. Oh, wait, it's the guy from Tim Travels. I don't know what it is, but 5 of the inspections that I've ever had have been in, or 2 of the inspections I've ever had have been in Maryland, and they were both level 1, level 2. The rest of the inspections I've ever had were level 3s. 1 in Illinois, 1 in Indiana, and 1 in Mississippi. So, you know, I was like, so I sent a message. I'm like, hey, I don't know if I want this guy, you know, his first day, you know, I'm like, hey, you just graduated from boot camp. Okay, tomorrow, combat, like we're going to be in a shooting war tomorrow. So, you know, I sent that message and he's like, well, you know, we can't have, you know, he's ready to go. Why do we want to have him sitting around and paying him to sit home? Which is code for, well, we want him on your truck, so you have to pay him. And, you know, and I was like, so finally he's like, then he was basically like in the message, he's like, what could go wrong, you know? So I'm like, okay, let me call him. So I called him and I'm like, hey, you know, I said, look, there's 3 entities. When I have a trainee on my truck, there's 3 entities involved that have a CSA score. Me, the trainee, and Prime. I said, if he's behind the wheel and gets pulled into a weigh station, guess which one of the 3 is not going to have their CSA score impacted? Yeah, it's me. So I'm telling you that I'm trying to make sure that I'm not setting up a brand new TNT trainee for failure. And you're telling me, well, oh, you know, that's the risk you take every day. Well, yeah, I know it's the risk you take every day. But guess what? The very first day you're ever driving on the actual road, doing an actual load, is, you know, hopefully just a day where you're learning lots of stuff and you're taking lots of stuff in. And, you know, I know this job is not hard. You don't have to be like super smart to do it. In fact, candidly, you could be pretty damn dumb to do this job. But there are certain things you gotta know to be successful out on the road and to successfully navigate a DOT inspection. Okay? So, for instance, like the last level 2 I got in Maryland, like the trooper, and this was at a weigh station, she pulled out my, you know, she said, I want to see your triangles, I need to see your fire extinguisher, and you know, every driver keeps their triangle somewhere different. Actually, after that incident, or after that inspection, I kind of had this epiphany, and I moved my triangles because earlier I had to get them out from under the bunk, because I kept my triangles under the bunk because I didn't want them over here on the left side. Because if I'm broken down or, you know, on the side of the road and I need to put triangles out, I don't want to have to stand over there to get them. So I kept them internal because we don't have the doors on the right side of the truck like we should for safety purposes. So now I actually keep my triangles down, slid along the passenger seat inside the handrail that's over there. And I did that because I want them on the right side of the truck and accessible. I just got them out from under the bunk. But anyway, you know, I was like, look, I said, if he doesn't know how to answer any questions or do something that they task him with, they can write him a ticket. It's just how it is. If he doesn't know how to access the logs, they might say, no, you, meaning me, you can't help him, right? But if I haven't even had a chance to really train him up on that, it's a ticket, right? It's a failure. So, you know, but then, you know, he was like, well, it's just a risk we got to take, which is, you know, I kind of was like, you know, you're saying that, but if he happens to get an inspection and gets a ticket, then he's the very first day, he's going to have an extra 10,000 miles put on his TNT requirement. So, you know, I thought it was a little short-sighted. I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I like my fleet manager. I think my fleet manager has a lot of strengths. He does a lot of good stuff. And, you know, but I disagree with the call on this one. Although, candidly, I'm sure that he's getting input from others, as they say, the others. Okay, so today's the, what is today? The 11th of May, 5/11. On this day in history, lots of stuff happened, of course, but this day in history, James K. Polk, K stands for Knox. And this was in 1846. He went to Congress and asked for a declaration of war against Mexico. Apparently there was some fight over street tacos, and next thing you know, we got to go down there and beat some ass. So anyway, the war in Mexico was where a lot of the people that would become famous during the Civil War, which basically started 15 years later, from 1846, where a lot of them cut their teeth. A lot of both Union and Confederate officers were in the U.S. Army and fought in the Mexican War. So that was that. So this is not this is not really trucking related, but I have a friend and colleague, Lyle, over at No Hippie Trucking and Transportation. And I think the world of the guy, even though by the way, speaking of Lyle, Bob Marley died on this day in, I don't even know what year it was. 81? Could it be that long ago? He was only 36. He died of cancer. So anyway, yeah, Bob Marley died on this day at age 36. And I want to say it was 81, but that just doesn't seem right. I'll have to double check. But anyway, so my friend Lyle did this video. It's his most recent video. I recommend you watch it because it'll kind of tell you what I'm talking about. So he basically did a video where he said, hey, you know, things are hard right now. Like, it's hard to make money, blah, 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 right? And while I don't necessarily disagree with that, I do think that, you know, a lot of people that I know we still have jobs, we're still making money, we're still making our mortgage payment, car payments, or whatever, right? We're still, I mean, I know that I'm just using my kind of mad money that my wife gives me, and I'm pouring it into the stock market because I think there's a lot of good stocks that are on sale, and, you know, 10 years from now, I think I'm going to be pleased that I did that. But he was talking about coming out of the door at a truck stop, and there was some, you know, person, I don't know, I don't want to say they were homeless or houseless, because they might not have been, but they were asking for money. And apparently some other truck driver was basically crapping on them because they were asking for money. And Lyle was like, hey, I'm grateful that that guy ran interference for me because, you know, I'm out here working hard and I don't want to give any of this money away. You know, when I've been making more, you know, I've been more generous and stuff. And so I wanted to address that because I think that that's a perspective that a lot of people may have, and maybe I've had that perspective in the past, you know, where I've just been like, oh, well, you know, get a job, you know. But I've grown and I've learned, and I wanna like maybe put this in terms that I think that other people don't think of. And let me just preface this by saying, I've mentioned, I mean, I'm not a super religious person, but I do have my belief system, right? That's based in part on religion. And I've mentioned that, you know, like I'm a Christian, right? And I can tell you from actually having, and I say actually because a lot of people that spout off about the Bible, you're like, that's not in there. Or like, you are totally not interpreting that correctly. But here's the thing, right? The scriptures, and by the way, I would include, I know of no organized religion that does not promote the idea of charity in some way, other than maybe these people that adhere to the, what is it, the prosperity gospel. They're kind of like, oh well, if your life is hard financially, it's because you're not worthy enough of God's, you know, bounty or whatever. So anyway, you know, forget about like any specific religion. Let's just assume that you know, as human beings, like we are, it's hoped that we'll be charitable. But here's what I want you to think about. Don't think about like money, right? Because Lyle was talking about how people like squeegee kids, who by the way often get violent reactions from people in like Baltimore City. I know that for a fact. No, because I don't want anybody. I would actually give them money not to wash my windows. But Lyle was also talking about a guy who's like knocking back a beer at the same time he's like directing people into parking spots at a truck stop, right? And again, I'd be like, dude, I'll give you money not to direct me into a spot. Just stay out of my way so you don't fall under my trailer wheels and me have to explain what happened to safety. But I want you to think about charity in a different way, because the scriptures say, at least scriptures I've read, that we're all beggars, right? Like all of us need something. We all are beggars as we go through life. And if you've ever been around a baby or a really old person, a person that's maybe very close to death, you know that everybody needs somebody else's help at some point in their life. And we're all beggars, right? Nobody is going to go through life and be able to do everything that needs to be done for them by them. And you know, and let me just say this for starters, right? If there's somebody that's homeless or houseless, as some people say, it is extraordinarily hard for them to find work. Now you say, well, why is that? Like they could just go apply for a job. And my question to anybody that says that is, have you ever applied for a job that didn't ask for an address? And if you have, if you just wrote, I live under the 17th Street overpass, do you really think that person's going to get hired? I mean, let's be honest. The answer is no, they're not. They're not going to get hired. It does not meet the requirements to hire somebody. So when you see a person that's homeless and you're like, and they're asking for money or some other help, right? Because I view money is the same to me as time or effort or even like ideas, right? Anything can be monetized, right? Money is just an asset to me, right? Like if you're hungry, you trade money for food, right? It's just barter, right? Read what the bill says. It's like legal tender, but it's just part of stuff. Like people say, oh, I don't have any cash, but I own $3 million in real estate. People would be like, oh, that guy's rich. I'm like, really? That fucking dude doesn't even have a quarter to get a cup of coffee. How's he rich? Well, he's got $3 million worth of real estate. You get my point. So I got to thinking about like giving things to people who won't do something for themselves, or more importantly, can't do something for themselves. And here's the example I'd like you to think about. In the United States, only a very tiny percentage of all the firefighters are paid firefighters, or what we would also refer to as career firefighters. And in fact, if you're anywhere that's not near a major urban area, some kind of urban area, it is highly likely that if you need help from fire or EMS, both fire and EMS, that at least somebody that comes to help you is a volunteer. And in fact, in a lot of places, everybody that comes to help you is going to be a volunteer. Now, I don't count the state trooper that shows up, because that's their job, and they're not really there to help you. They're really there to investigate. But they're not going to cut you out of a car. They're not going to put water on a fire. They're just going to stand around and, you know, determine who's at fault or whatever, or, you know, call a wrecker. And I'm simplifying here, but again, you get my point. But here's what I would say. I used to be a volunteer firefighter. I was a volunteer firefighter for 6 years. I can tell you that at all sorts of inconvenient times, I answered fire calls and EMS calls, right? It's cold as shit outside in the middle of February, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and my pager goes off. In fact, I remember one time I slept through it. I was very tired. I slept through my pager going off. My wife woke me up and said, "Terry, there's a box alarm in Westminster, and both the truck and the engine need to go." She knew enough about what the pager was saying, right? That meant my station was like on the first alarm, you know? And so I got out of bed, got my clothes on, and got to the fire station in less than 5 minutes. Got my bunker gear, or my turnout gear, or whatever you want to call it, got on the engine, and off we went in the middle of the night, and it's cold as shit outside. I did that so many times, right? Or I went to fires when it was hot as hell outside. And, you know, why did I do that? Because I was willing to help somebody who couldn't do something that they needed me to do, right? And it's no different, though, because I didn't say, well, why don't you have fire training, right? Why didn't you get an EMT certification? Why didn't you sweat your ass off climbing ladders and learning how to put out these fires and going through all this training? I mean, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours away from my family just to get trained to help these people. There's a train coming. These trains, I love this spot because these trains barrel through here. Watch how fast this guy's going to be going. And actually, he's getting up to speed because he's picking up speed. I know because these intermodals when he's coming out of outside of Chicago. Oh, there goes prime boxes. So anyway, my point is that we're all beggars, right? If you get in a wreck out in the middle of Podunkville, America, you're gonna hope that there's somebody like I used to be that doesn't say, well, hey, you got in a wreck, get yourself out of it, right? You're the one that rolled that truck into the ditch, cut yourself out of that truck, you know? I don't care if your legs are broken, drag yourself up the embankment and get yourself to the hospital. We all need somebody, right? You know, you ever meet somebody that needed a kidney? Do you think they could do it themselves? No, they needed somebody. And you know, none of us are able to do everything for ourselves. And the thing is, right, like, people don't set out to be unsuccessful. Like, when that person who asks you for money, right? Sometimes if you're like, hey, you know, I got this moral compunction about giving money because they're just going to buy drugs or alcohol. And my answer is, yeah, what's your point, right? Like, you're making a moral judgment about somebody, and you're in no position to make a moral judgment about somebody unless, I don't know, unless you're first name is Jesus and your last name is Christ, maybe you can make the moral decision, right? But what would the Savior do, right? He would help them, obviously. But here's the other thing. If you're like, oh, I'm worried how they're going to spend the money that I give to them, right? Then say to them, hey, are you hungry? Because I am happy to buy you dinner. Because here's the thing. A lot of times I don't have cash on me. But I will say to somebody that's asking for help, hey, I don't have any cash, but I can go inside and use my debit card to get you food. I have done that many times. And guess what? 90% of the time, those people that I offered that to took me up on it and were grateful, right? They asked for money because that was easier than saying, hey, will you walk with me into a truck stop, a store, a restaurant, and buy me what I need to survive? But I've done that many times. There was a guy I used to buy lunch for fairly frequently in Bethesda, Maryland. One of the wealthiest communities in the frickin' country, right? And I'm there, you know, wearing my fucking $350 shoes and making six figures and working in a gleaming office building and, you know, having lunch, you know, where the office just goes out to lunch and we spend, you know, 150 bucks on lunch for everybody. But this guy Roscoe would come up to me and he asked me, he says, hey, can you spare some money for food? And I said, no, but I'll do something better. I will buy you lunch. Where do you want to go? Pick any restaurant. And by the way, there's not a lot of cheap restaurants in Bethesda downtown. He picked a sandwich shop that probably was the cheapest. And I was like, hey, do you need chips? Do you want something to drink? I've done that many times. And I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you that I can't go through life without somebody helping me. And neither can you, and neither can anybody else, you know? But here's the funny thing. That guy at the truck stop who's hanging around, who you're like, oh, I'm not going to help him. What would you say if I told you that guy at the truck stop, when somebody's truck caught on fire in the middle of the night because their reefer overheated or whatever, or their bunk heater just caught the truck on fire, that they went up to the truck that was on fire and pounded on the door when all the other truckers were asleep? They pounded on the door because they're just kind of up hoping somebody will, you know, buy them a biscuit sandwich. They pound on the door and tell somebody their truck's on fire and save their life. When you need a kidney, anybody with a kidney is your friend. It might not be a donor match, but if you think that having money is enough, go ask Walter Payton about it. Walter Payton, a wealthy man, certainly one of the greatest football players in the history of the game, and a beloved figure in America, couldn't find somebody to give him a body part that he needed to survive, right? The guy that you tell, get a job, he might have the kidney you need, or he might knock on your door when your truck's on fire, or he might, you know, the worth of souls is great in the eyes of the Lord, and the worth of souls is great, period. And so all I'm saying is this. I'm not telling you to give money to people if you're uncomfortable with it. What I'm telling you is to see their humanity and say, but for the grace of God, there go I, and acknowledge, humble yourself and acknowledge that you can't do it alone, and acknowledge that neither can they. Because they might be awesome at something that you're not. And you never know what could happen, right? So anyway, that's my sermon for today. If you watched this long, I appreciate it. If you didn't watch this long, it's okay too. So anyway, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.